Hello and welcome to another episode of Android Dev 101. Today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at material design and how to implement it in your applications. In the sample application we've created for today, we've created an application that is backwards compatible all the way back to Android Ice Cream Sandwich, but using some of the aspects of material design like color palettes. So let's take a look. First thing we're going to look at is our colors XML. This is where we define some important colors for our application, like the primary color, the primary dark color, and accent. These are color schemes, part of the material design guidelines, and we're going to utilize these colors in our application. If we jump over to the styles for application, for instance, we see that we've created an app theme, which derives from App Compact. By including App Compact in our project, we're able to utilize some of the material design color palette aspects, even on devices that are not running Lollipop or above. So here we see we've defined our color primary dark, and our color accent. If we look at a simulator running Android Lollipop, we see that it even stylizes the status bar as we'd want. That's because it's running Lollipop and above. So the material design colors that we have designated in our style theme are actually utilized for things like the status bar as well. So let's jump back in. In order to utilize App Compact, we have to include it as a dependency for this project. So if we right click on our app module and click our open module settings, jump over to the dependencies tab, we see we not only have App Compact, the Android support library, this is version 21 for instance, we also have a third-party library called Floating Action Button that's going to allow us to add floating action buttons in a material design-like view to our application. And we have the Android card view from the support library. This is going to allow us to add a card, but you could just as easily add multiple cards to your application. So let's jump over to the UI for this single screen application and see how we implement those elements. So as we see from the WYSIWYG editor, we have a single fab or floating action button at the top. This will change us from edit mode to non-edit mode. In the middle, we have a card view, which will take all of the UI from card views from the support library. And inside, we're going to put a edit text so we can edit text inside that. And then at the bottom, you can't see them because they're invisible right now. There are two other floating action buttons, which will animate in when we're in edit mode. So we jump over to the XML version, we can see the classes we're using. We, for instance, have the toolbar here, which is the material design toolbar, which we can use through backwards compatibility with the support library. We also have a floating action button and two more floating action buttons that are invisible. This is from the third-party library. As you see listed here, you can easily add that by adding it to your dependencies, just as we did the support library. And finally, we have our card view from the support library, and inside an edit text, which we'll add text to. We're setting it as default enabled false, so it's not editable until we click that edit button. So now let's jump over to our Java code and see how we tie these views in. So in the Java code for our main activity, we just have one activity for this sample application. In our onCreate, we create our toolbar and set it as a support action bar so that it can be utilized for previous versions of Android as well as Lollipop and above. Then we grab our floating action buttons, and we also grab our text view from inside our card view. Now we've already set the on clicks for these floating action buttons, so when the save button is clicked, we just change edit mode so we're not in edit mode. When the cancel button is clicked, we reset the old text that was previously there, and obviously change and toggle the edit mode. And then the on edit click, when the edit button is clicked or when any of the other buttons are clicked, we're going to toggle if it's in edit mode, which you see here. We're also going to do some animations. If we are currently not in edit mode, then we're going to need to animate in the save button and the cancel button for edit mode, and vice versa. If we are in edit mode, we'll animate those out with a translation Y animation, which we'll see in a second. And also, if we're entering edit mode, then we need to save the old text before we do any editing in case the user presses cancel. And last, if we're in edit mode, we need to enable that text inside of our card view. Okay, so if we take a look at the animations, first, the fade in animation. When the edit button is clicked, we'll either fade it in or fade it out. We're going to use an object animator, which is a newer class, which was released, is available as of Android Ice Cream Sandwich, and I believe even before in Honeycomb. And that will allow us to animate certain aspects of any kind of view or other elements. In this case, we're going to be changing the alpha, either from if we go to the constant from 1 to 0 if we're going to fade it out, or from 0 to 1, depending on what mode we're changing. And vice versa if we're fading out. So we have fade in and fade out. We'll just call this function with the boolean whatever operation we're doing, and we can fade out that edit button. Now for the sliding animations, on the bottom save and cancel buttons, we're going to have a slide in animation. So similarly, we determine if we're going to be sliding in or sliding out according to a given boolean. And then we're going to produce another object animator, but this time it's going to be a translation Y animator from either start point to end point of 0 to our constant for slide pixels. This is going to be the number of pixels we will slide in this animation, whether it's sliding in or sliding out. And then we set a duration of a constant, and we set an interpolator of the decelerate interpolator with a special factor. This will give it not a straight linear animation, but a more kind of natural decelerate animation. And when the animation is done, if we're animating, if we're not animating in, if we're animating out, we'll set those views to invisible, so they won't be visible anymore after the animation. So that's all the code that we needed to create our simulation. And let's run it on our emulator. We have two simulators actually running right now. First, let's pick the simulator running Android 5.0.0 or Android Lollipop and see how it looks there. Here we see it starting up, and we see our colors as designed. We also see the status bars colored in with our primary dark. So for Lollipop and above, it will adapt to the running operating system and utilize the new tools available. Now, if we run it again on our second simulator, which is running a previous version of Android, Android 4.1.1, and we can see it all. It looks almost the same. Obviously, the status bar is not colored in on this earlier version of Android, not being able to deal with the color palette appropriately, but the compact is able to adapt for for Android Lollipop and above and implement those colors. So we can hit the edit button, and now we can edit our edit text. So we could say like, this is my first log entry, Captain. And we saw that the buttons were animated in, and this button faded out. So when we click save, we'll see them slide back out, and the other button fade back in. That might have been a little too fast to see it on the simulator. And we can edit some more. So if we make a mistake, we can click the cancel button as we saw, and it'll erase it. Or we can go back in and edit. That's all. And save. And that's it for this lesson in material design in applications for Android Lollipop and also certain versions before Android Lollipop with backwards compatibility. Thank you for joining us. The links to the third-party libraries as well as the code for this source project will be available down below, so please feel free to download them. And we look forward to seeing you next time from Android Dev 101.